Good evening, study partners. We are excited to begin a new tractate, a new Masechta, Masechtas Megillah. Tonight's class is dedicated in loving memory of my dear mother, Rivka Bas Harav Reb Shloimeh. Masechtas Megillah talks about Megillah. Specifically, the topic of which Megillah, it's the Megillah's Esther. There are 5 Megillahs. There's Megillah's Esther, which is read on Purim. There's Megillah's Rus, which is read on Shavuos. There's Shir HaShirim, which is read on Pesach. And Koheles, which is read on Sukkot. And Eicha, which is read on Tisha B'Av. The Chabad custom is only to read in a formal manner Megillah's Esther on Purim and Megillah's Eicha on Tisha B'Av. The rest we study, but we don't read them in a formal manner. Now, Purim, of course, celebrates the victory of the Jewish people in the times of Esther and Mordechai over Haman and all of the descendants of the Amalekites, those who descend from Amalek. They wanted to destroy the Jewish people, and of course, as we all know, the Jewish people were saved. And so, the Jewish people went to war, and they finished the war on the 13th and celebrated on the 14th. Those who were in Shushan were still fighting on the 14th, and so they were only able to celebrate on the 15th day of the month of Adar. And so from that point in time, the Jewish people at large celebrate Purim on the 14th day of Adar. Those who are in Shushan, celebrate on the 15th. Now, in order to establish this custom, so they included all Shushan itself. The walls had been breached, and the walls were taken down after some time. So Shushan no longer had walls in later years. So what did they do? They made they came up with an idea as follows. Any city that had a wall in the times of Yeshua ben Nun, when Yeshua ben Nun led the conquest of Eretz Yisrael, those are considered walled cities, even though they don't have a wall today. And we celebrate Purim on the 15th day of the month of Adar during those years. On the 15th day of Adar in all years. That was the idea. Now, the reason for this is because Yerushalayim, which was given a city of prominence, is a city of prominence. The walls had been demolished also at some points. And so they wanted to establish Yerushalayim as a permanent city where this would be considered a special city. And so they said, whichever city had walls in the times of Yeshua ben Nun, that is considered a walled city. So all walled city in the area would celebrate on the 15th day. Today, in our days, all these cities it's difficult to know where exactly which city was and what constitutes what city, whether it was a walled city in the time of Yeshua or not, except for Yerushalayim. So in our days, practically speaking, Shushan Purim is only celebrated where? Yerushalayim, and that's it. Shushan itself, we're not sure where exactly was Shushan. And so even in Shushan, it's a questionable thing. So
there wasn't Yerushalayim in Yeshua's time. There was no walled city. I mean, there wasn't any concept of a walled Yerushalayim in Yeshua's time.
Yeah, there was.
Apparently there was.
What?
In any case, so let's begin. We have a lot of ground to cover, so we're going to begin. Megillah, reading the Megillah, Megillah's Esther, Nikres B'Achadasar. Sometimes it's read on the 11th day of the month. B'Shnei Masar, sometimes on the 12th of the month. B'Shleish Asar, on the 13th of the month. Ba'Arba Asar, the 14th. B'Chamisha Asar, or on the 15th of the month. Le'Pochis V'Le'Yeser, not earlier days, not the 10th or the 9th, not later days, not the 16th or the 17th. Villages that were cities that were surrounded by walls in the times of Yehoshua ben Nun, Kredim b'chamisha asar. These cities read the Megillah on their Purim. When is their Purim? On the 15th day of Adar. Kforim ba'ayoris kdelis, villages and large cities, Kredim ba'arba asar. They read on the 14th day, as we do in our days. Ella, but there's an exception when we're talking about villages. Sha'akforim magdimim liyem haknisa. Villages sometimes advance their day of reading to the day of entering, the day that they go into the towns. And we'll talk about what this means. Smaller villages, they didn't necessarily have shuls, and they didn't necessarily have people who know how to read the Megillah. And these were people, the villages, were the ones where agriculture was more prevalent. And so they were the ones who provided food and water to the larger cities. And so they would bring in their wares and their food on Mondays and Thursdays. Ezra established that the Torah should be read on Mondays and Thursdays, so these people who are coming in would now have an opportunity to hear words of Torah. In addition, the courts were open on those days, so if they had a claim or they had an issue, they can go to the court, to the Beis Din, to settle this out. So in order that they would not have to come in an additional time, so they would go back to the day of entry. So now the Mishnah delineates exactly how this is so. If the 14th day of the month of Adar came out on a Monday, so in such a case, this is a day that they're coming in anyway. So large cities which had scholars and court systems and so on and so forth, they were able to read on that day, as always. And in addition, those who came in to sell their food and market day, which was established on Mondays and Thursdays, they also can hear it on that day because they didn't have to come in again. So they bring all their stuff, hear the Megillah, hear the Torah reading, and then open the market.
Between the 9th and the 11th.
Not on the time. We're talking about if the 14th of Adar was on market day itself, was on a Monday or Thursday, so then no issue. However, but those that were surrounded by walls in the times of Yeshua ben Nun, their Purim is not on the Monday, their Purim would be on Tuesday that year because it's always on the 15th. If it was on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, so the smaller villages would hear the Megillah on the day that they came in. Which day was that? Monday. Right, so in this particular case, it was Monday because we go backward, not forward. We don't push it off, but we read it earlier. But larger cities, they read on the regular day as always. And those that are circled by walled cities, they read it the following day as usual on the 15th. If it was read, if the 14th of Adar was on Thursday, so again, villages and larger cities will read it on the regular day, on the Yom Chamishi, because on that day even the smaller villages can come in when they're coming in anyway to hear the Megillah. Erev Shabbos, if it fell out, if the 14th of Adar fell on a Friday, so the Kforim, the smaller villages, go back a day to when? Thursday. To Thursday, not the 14th, to the 13th.
13.
Yes.
Yeah, why not?
And the larger cities, and the larger cities, and even the walled cities read that day. Why don't the walled cities read on the next day? Because it's Shabbos, and we're afraid somebody's going to carry the Megillah. Shabbos, if it falls out on a Shabbos, which nowadays, since Hillel's calendar, it doesn't fall out on Shabbos, but in the old days, it can fall out on any day of the week. So if it fell out on a Shabbos, the villages, as well as larger cities, push it back a day to the Yom HaKnisa, which is Thursday. And cities that were surrounded by walls, push it up till Sunday. And that's it. If it fell out on a Sunday, the smaller villages go back till Thursday. Larger cities read it on that day. Sunday. When Purim falls out on a Sunday, they can read it that day.
They read it Sunday.
Yeah, but the smaller villages, the villagers, they're not coming in on Sundays. They only come in Mondays and Thursdays. So they have to push it back until Thursday. And those that are encircled by a wall, Lamocher, they read it on the 15th day as usual. So, lots of different scenarios there.
Wow.
Asks the Mishnah, Izehu Ir Gdela, what is considered a large city? Kol sheyesh bo asara batlanim. Any city that has 10 people that are dedicated, unoccupied men, batlanim, they don't go to work. What do? They sit in the shul and they help make the minyan and they study Torah. So that's called batlanim. Their batlanim seems to be like a pejorative, but it's not. It's referring to a person who sits and studies Torah or stays in shul all day. So larger cities can afford to support such people. That there's always a minyan learning in shul. It's a kollel of sorts. Pachas, so that's considered a large city. Pachas mekan harei kfar. But if there's not at least 10 people whose job it is to stay in shul and study Torah and to make minyan, such a city is called a kfar, a village.
How about fasting on Mondays? Where did that come from? Fasting on Mondays and Thursdays.
We're not going to talk about that now. Be'elu omru. Now, in these things, in this particular discussion, makdimim v'lo ma'achrin, we go whenever we have a question as to when we should read the Megillah. So if the kfarim, if they're not going to be in the city on the day of the 14th of Adar, we go backwards. We read it from the Yom HaKnisa Shelifnei Zadeh, the town day, the market day that was before. So if it's on a Friday, we go back to Thursday. If it's on Sunday, we're going to go back to Thursday. We're not going to push it off till tomorrow, which is also a market day. Mondays and Thursdays are market days. So we go back to the last one.
Next question. What is the earliest time they could read? 11th of Adar?
That's what we said before, yes.
Oh, I just missed. Oh, okay, thank you.
So in this regard, we go backwards. But the time that the Kohanim and the people bring a donation offering of wood, we already spoke about this in which Masechtas Tainis, we just recently spoke about this last week. So the dates that they're supposed to bring the wood, if it turns out that date is Shabbos, so you can't bring the wood on Shabbos, obviously. So what happens? We are ma'acher. So the people who are supposed to bring it on Shabbos, when do they bring it?
On Thursday.
On Sunday. We push it off. We delay it.
Oh, we delay it. Wow.
We delay it. So the Mishnah is contrasting this practice of reading the Megillah on an earlier day versus other practices which we delay by a day or two.
But if they don't bring wood, then...
So the people from before, their wood would have to be sufficient for the Shabbos. The Tisha B'Av, what about Tisha B'Av? If Tisha B'Av falls on Shabbos, do we fast on Friday or Thursday? No, we don't. When do we fast? On Sunday. We delay it.
Right.
So, in all of these cases, we delay. When fast days fall out on Shabbos, we delay it. So Shavasa B'Tamas, for example, if it falls out on Shabbos, we delay it.
Except for
Yom Kippur.
Yom Kippur is mandated by the Torah, so we fast even on Shabbos. The fast of Esther is an exception to this rule, by the way. Because fast days we want to push off. This is Peronius. This is talking about difficult times for the Jewish people, so we push it off. The fast of Esther doesn't commemorate the difficult times. The fast of Esther actually commemorates the victory that came about as a result of the teshuvah that the Jewish people did. So therefore, we're not fasting because of the tough times that the Jewish people encountered. We're fasting as a commemoration of the tshuva that the people did and the nitzachim, the victory that ensued as a result.
And always before the Kriyat Megillah.
Correct. So now, what about the Chagiga? Chagiga is, there's a mitzvah to bring on the first day of Yom Tiv a korban. So this would be a korban shlomim that a person would bring on the first day of Yom Tov. What if the first day of Yom Tov is Shabbos? So we're not allowed to bring it on Shabbos. So we bring it the next day. Ma'achrin. We delay it by a day, the second day of Yom Tov.
Not to bring it before so it could be
No.
shechted on Shabbos?
No.
You can't bring korban.
Korban
Korbanos
shlomim.
were brought on Shabbos.
What?
Korbanos were brought on.
But not voluntary korbanos and not a korban shlomim, not a peace offering. So since you can make up for it on the next day or throughout the holiday, so therefore we push it off a day. We don't pull it back a day. Hakel took place in the evening following the first day of Sukkot. If it took place on Shabbos, it was an issue because we had to bring small babies. Noshim v'ta, anoshim v'noshim v'ta. Men, women. Hakel is when the Kohen God, when the king reads from the Torah on a special wooden bima that was set up in the Beis HaMikdash. So men, women, and children came for this special thing. This took place in the year after the Shemitah year, the Hakel year it's called.
Shemitah is Hakel.
No, the year after the Shemitah.
Got it.
So comes the Hakel year, and that's when everybody assembles, even the men and even the women and the children. So since we can't carry children on Shabbos,
Oh, wow. Okay.
so we push it off to the next day.
Oh.
Now, Afal Pi, getting back to the Purim, in Purim, getting back to the Megillah, reading the Megillah. Afal Pi Amru Magdim V'li Ma'achrin, even though we said that in regards to reading the Megillah, we always pull it back days as opposed to postponing it. Mm-hmm. Nevertheless, those days, even though we could be reading the Megillah on the 11th, 12th, and 13th, on the 11th and 12th, and the 13th, Mutarim Behesperu B'tainis, you're allowed to eulogize on those days, and you're allowed to fast on those days, and you're allowed to give Matanis Levyonim, poor gifts to the poor.
I think you can always do it.
No, but b'yotze your Matanis Levyonim for Purim. Mashalach Manas has to be on that day, even in the Kfar. But in the Kfar, there may not be a poor person that you can give the money to. So you can in those days you can, for the people in the Kfar, you can give Matanas Levyonim early. Rabbi Yehuda, says Rabbi Yehuda, he qualifies this idea. And he says, a Mosai, when is this the case? When could you recite the Megillah and read the Megillah early? Is only in places that it's an established custom that you go to town, you go to the city on Mondays and Thursdays. But if that's not the case, like in our day and age, we don't have a market day that we go to the market into the Manhattan or to Hackensack or wherever. It's not established days. Any day you can go to Costco, BJ's, Food Showcase, Zadie's, and so on and so forth. Markets are open every day now. So in our day and age, even in a small village, you go. When do you read the Megillah? By B'yayim, on the appropriate day. Because it's no longer the custom to have market days only on Mondays and Thursdays. What happens in the time of the Beis HaMikdash when they were Ma'aber Shanis? They would make leap years. When did they make the leap year? In the month of Adar. In the month of Adar.
Right,
Anytime during Adar they would make leap years. Right. So now, what happens if they read the Megillah in the first Adar, and then and then after this point, Bezdin decides to make it a leap year. So what do we do?
Read it again.
So you read it again in the second Adar. Now, says the Mishnah, Ein bein Adar Harishon Adar Sheni. There's no difference in the Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni, Ela Kriyas HaMegillah Matanas Levyonim, except for the difference of Kriyas HaMegillah, reading the Megillah, and Matanas Levyonim. Now, obviously, there are other differences, but in terms of the mitzvahs, this is when the mitzvahs take place.
When do we have Purim? First or second?
Second Adar. Yeah, which is an interesting phenomenon, because Generally speaking, we would want to get it earlier rather than later. But again, when we say Ein Bein Adar Harishon L'Sheni, in the term, what are we talking about here? What are the things that we've spoken about? Megillah and Matanas Lavyanim. Mishalech Manas we didn't mention here in the Mishnah, so we're not talking about it. So that's what it means, just to be clear. So in any case, but as far as Simcha is concerned, when are we B'Simcha? In both others.
Yeah, I think it's better that way.
Yeah.
This way you delay it. You delay 2 months. 2 months is Simcha.
It's at the same time, right?
Machzas HaShekel, it's a good question. So Machzas HaShekel in the temple times was when they announced it. Whenever they announced it, that's when it was.
But
Probably the first.
on Purim.
Yeah. In our days, it's just a zecher to that. Okay. Hey, Mishnah Hey. Now, before we go on to Mishnah Hey, the Mishnah employed a term, Ein Bein Adar Harishon Adar Hasheni. There is no difference between Adar Rishon and Adar Sheni except for. So once the Mishnah used this phraseology, the Mishnah now, from now till the end of the Perek, is going to talk about other things, random things, that also have no difference between this and that. So there's no other connection other than the phrase, the terminology that we're using. So you ready for this? Ein ben Yom Tov l'Shabbos, ela eichel nefesh bilvad. There's no difference between Yom Tov, the laws, the prohibitions that are practiced on Shabbos and Yom Tov, other than things that are permitted for cooking food, for eating food. So, which is a lot of things, by the way.
Right.
We can slaughter an animal. We can do lots of different things. We can move fire from one place to the next. We can cook and bake and knead and all of these kinds of things, which are all asur on Shabbos. But there's other than that, there's no difference. Other than the many differences that are carrying, for example, because you want to carry food to your friends, so you can carry on Yom Tov. It's considered a eichel nefesh thing. Hillel, by the way, Shammai says that you can only do these things for cooking, for food. You can't carry things that are not for food. Hillel says no. Once we are allowed to do these things for cooking, we could do it for other things as well, and that's the halacha.
No muktzah on Yom Tov, technically.
There's certain muktzahs on Yom Tov, sure.
Certain.
Yeah.
But many of them don't really.
Because of eichel nefesh, the ones that have to do with eichel nefesh. Ein bin Shabbos liyom kippurim. There's no difference between the prohibitions of Shabbos and Yom Kippur, meaning to say the prohibitions that take place on Shabbos also take place on Yom Kippur. Ela shezez deinei v'dei adam. But rather, what is the difference? So all the prohibitions, anything that's not allowed on Shabbos is not allowed on Yom Kippur. What is the difference between Shabbos and Yom Kippur?
We eat a lot.
Well, that's the things that you're allowed to do. Here we're talking about the things you're not allowed to do. It's shezez deinei v'dei adam. On Yom Kippur, if you violate the Yom Kippur, if you violate the Shabbos, so then an earthly court will give you skila, will stone you. Whereas if you violate Yom Kippur, the punishment is a heavenly court. You get kares, excision, or early death, or excision, being cut off from your source. So the point is that one is punishable by man and one is punishable by the court of heaven.
We were in Patterson for Yom Kippur, and I walked home. I walked home with Jerry, but we weren't sure because it's a Yom Tov, it's Shabbos.
You're not allowed to carry on.
Oh boy.
Ein bin hamuder hana mechaveri lamuder mimenu ma'achal. Now, this is a loaded one here. There is no difference between a person who takes a vow that he will not benefit from another person. So a person says, I take a vow, I swear that I will not have any benefit from Mr. So-and-so. So if he says that, versus if he says, I will not have any benefit in relation to food from such and such, from Mr. So-and-so, so there's a difference, there's a practical difference. When you say I will not have a benefit of food, he can't really benefit, he can't give you money. Why? Because money could then go buy food. Right. He can't, there's many things that he can't do because in an indirect way, this will somehow
Negate
make
the vow.
food available to you. So it's the same thing. It's essentially the same vow, except elo drissas haregel, the kelim shein oisim bahem oichel nefesh. Except for drissas regel, which means walking on his property. So if I make a vow, I will not have any benefit from Mr. So-and-so. I can't take a shortcut through his property. I can't even walk on his property. Walking is a benefit.
What if he holds the door for you?
You
That's
can't.
a benefit.
That's a benefit. These are all benefits. You can't have any benefit from it. But if I swear that I won't have any benefit in relation to food, all of these things apply except for walking on his property, which has nothing to do with food. It's not considered a benefit that results in food. And as well as if I can borrow a vessel that has nothing to do with food. So I can borrow his hammer, because a hammer has nothing to do with food.
But if you walk in his apartment, it might lead. He might.
No,
come
that's
into
not
the
what it's
kitchen.
talking about. That's
You
not what
don't
it's
use
talking
this
about.
hammer to crack nuts.
Which people do not prepare food for. Normally people don't use hammers to crack nuts. If it's dedicated for that, then you can't. So that's the difference. Again, we're using terminology, we're speaking various halachas that ain't bein this to that. Ain't bein nedarim lenedava is a person who takes a vow is a neder. A person who a nedava is a different thing. So a neder is a person who says harei alai. It's on me to bring a cow as a donation. So, and a person, that's a donation, and a nadav, that's a vow, and a nadava, a donation, so a person says, this cow, I'm going to bring to the Beis HaMikdash. So there's no difference between the two, except both of them will obligate you to bring that cow, to bring a cow, but the difference is when a person says, Harei alai, it's on me, so if this cow that he has in mind dies, he has to bring a different one. Okay. But if he says, Hareizu, this one, so then he doesn't have a chrayas, he's not responsible for it. If something happens to it. So let's read it inside. Ein ben nedarim lenedavis. There's no difference between vows and donations that a person accepts upon himself. When a person makes a vow, so then he's liable for it. He's responsible for the item. It has to get to its place. But when he makes a donation, but he's not responsible if something happens to it. Zion. Ein ben zav harei shtei re'is harei sholesh ela carbon. A zav is a man who experiences a male discharge. It's not talking about semen, but it's a semen-like discharge that's like dough.
But it could be zava as well.
A zava is a different thing. A zava is a woman who menstruates outside of her menstruation period. That's a whole other story. Okay. It's compared to a zav. It's similar to a zav in certain ways, in certain halachas, but it's a different phenomenon. So it's a male discharge, like a doughy substance coming out, and it has nothing to do with sexual desire either. So now it just flows out. So a person who sees such a seminal emission, such a discharge, I should say, twice, so he already becomes, if he sees it once, so he's not fully tummy. Sees it twice, he's tummy. Sees it 3 times, then he has to bring a carbon. Wow. And he has to go to a mikvah, a special mikvah.
Which korban? I'm sorry. Which korban?
He has to bring either 2 turtle doves or 2 young doves.
No, what's the name of the korban?
Chatat.
Chatat?
It's a korban zav. It's
There's no korban zav. No.
It's I guess it's a chatas vechod.
Yeah, it's not his fault, but he.
No, it's not a fault.
Right.
It's not a faulty thing.
But it's particular to the person, so it's a chatat.
What is that called? Is it called a chatas? I'm not sure. I have to get back to you on that. Okay. But in any case, it's two birds. That's what he has to bring. Now, what?
If he is poor. Or if
No. That's what it is. So now this is only if he experienced 3 discharges. But the tuma, and the mikvah, going to the mikvah in a mayan, in a special mayim chayim, as a special mikvah, not a regular mikvah. But it has to be a mayan. This he has to do even if he has only 2 sightings of this emission. A person who is holed up for a period of time due to a mitzvah condition. So we don't know. He's under quarantined. And we're waiting to find out if he's actually definitely a mitzvah. So such a person is considered, it has a tumah to him, and he has to be confined in such a period of time. But what is the difference? What is the difference? The difference is between a full-fledged mitzvah and a mitzvah that's being quarantined to see if he's going to be a mitzvah. The difference is priya or frima. Priya is letting his hair grow long. He doesn't have to let his hair grow long. And frima, he doesn't have to rend his garments. A mitzvah that's absolutely a mitzvah has to tear his clothing like a mourner. And
Wait a minute. So I thought it's a woman that.
a mitzvah could be a man or a woman. A mitzvah is a person with saras.
Yeah, that's sorry.
We're moving forward because we have a lot to cover. Ein bein tar mitech hezger letar mitech hechlet el tiskalach v'tziporim. There's no difference becoming purified from a person who's purified from quarantined, meaning to say that the interim period where we're not sure if he's an actual full mitzvah or not, except for in other words, he has to go to the mikveh also when he gets out. But the difference is that a mitzvah, a definite mitzvah, as opposed to a possible mitzvah, a definite mitzvah has to shave off all the hair on his body, and he has to bring the two birds, one which is slaughtered and one which is dipped in its blood, and set away to fly away. So that's in Negoyim. We'll learn all about that, but here we're just reviewing this very briefly. Ein ben svarim letfilin and mezuzos. There's no difference in the way you write svarim, which is Torah scrolls and books of scripture, neviim, ksuvim, and the way you write tefillin and mezuzos. Ella, except shasvarim, books, scriptural books, nichtavim b'chol lashon, can be written in any language. Utfilin and mezuzos einu nichtavim ala ashiros. But tefillin and mezuzos have to be written in Hebrew and in
Aramaic.
Not in Aramaic, in Lashon Kodesh. Tefillin and mezuzos are written in Lashon Kodesh from the Torah.
Yeah, Ashiris is the...
Ashirin is the script that you use to write it. It's a special script that we use today, till today.
From Babylonia.
Yeah, well, from the Assyrians, but the Assyrian script. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel came from Assyria. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Af besvarim lo yitru yishikas v'elo yavanis. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he says that Yafta lekim liyefes, this gave them a special, the Greeks were given a special privilege that the Torah can be written in Greek but no other language.
Wow.
So only Greek has the rich language that's enough for a proper Torah.
Wow.
But in our day and age, since the Greek has been tainted and contaminated by many other dialects and other words that don't come from ancient Greek, so you can't write a Torah in any language other than the way we have it today. There is no difference between a Kohen Gadol who was anointed with the anointing oil, or one who was appointed with the 8 clothes alone. A Kohen Gadol can be installed with a special oil, or by wearing the fact that he wears the 8 garments, special garments. Ella, so what is the difference? So both of them could fully practice as a Kohen Gadol. What does this mean? When you have a Kohen Gadol, the Kohen Gadol is not always pure. It's the fact. Many times he's not pure. For Yom Kippur, we make a whole special elaborate performance, as we learned in Masechtas Yoma, a whole elaborate process, so that he would be pure on Yom Kippur. We take him away from his wife. We would put him in a special chamber in order to make sure that he was pure on Yom Kippur. But the rest of the year, we wouldn't do that necessarily. So if he was impure, who's going to perform the high priest duties on that day that he's impure, on the days that he's impure? So what would they do? They had any number of substitute kohanim, gdolim. and they would wear the special 8 garments. They weren't wearing. They weren't wearing. They weren't anointed with the Shemen HaMishcha. Now here we're not even talking about that. Here what we're talking about is we're going to get to that point. But the point that we're making here first is that after a certain point, the Shemen HaMishcha, the anointing oil, was lost or hidden. So from a certain point on, the only way to become a Kohen Gadol was to put on these 8 vestments. So now there's no difference between a Kohen who became a Kohen Gadol through Mashiach, through anointing oil, or if he put on the 8 garments, except Parabo al Kol HaMitzvahs. There was a bull that was brought on by a Kohen Gadol. Instead of a goat, instead of a female goat, if he committed a sin that would or by accident, that if it was done on purpose would result in kares, but he did it by accident. So normally you bring a goat, a female goat. But because he's the Kohen Gadol and he had the Shemen HaMishcha on his head, so he has a different rule as explained in the Torah, and he has to bring a bull.
Bull and do smicha.
Everybody has to do smicha. But the point is that that's only if he's a Kohen Gadol that was anointed with oil. If he's a Kohen Gadol that was inducted by garments, so then he brings like anybody else a goat, a female goat.
Wow.
Ein ben kohen mishamish l'kohen shavar. There's no difference between a Kohen who is the Kohen Gadol, the Kohen HaShavar, versus a Kohen that only served in the past, which could be, like I said, any one of these substitutes, or a person who's too old or too weak to continue in this capacity. So now he's no longer the Kohen Gadol. He was Kohen Gadol for a day, and now there's another Kohen Gadol. So he was once a Kohen Gadol, but now he's not the Kohen Gadol. But so once he's a Kohen Gadol, so there's no difference between him. Now he can only marry a virgin girl by way of example, because he was a Kohen Gadol. Once a Kohen Gadol, always a Kohen Gadol to a degree. Except on Yom Kippur, there's only one Kohen Gadol who's going to bring the Par Yom Kippurim, the special bull that's offered on Yom Kippur. V'asirus ha'efa, and then there's a tenth of an ephah, which is brought half in the morning and half in the evening every single day. Who brings that? The Kohen Gadol that's ministering on that day. If the Kohen Gadol is back, then you don't bring that. Only the one who is actually working on that day. Amen. A bama is an altar that takes place outside of the Beis Hamikdash is called a bama. It's in the Beis Hamikdash or in the Mishkan, it's a mizbeach, a proper altar. A bama is a substitute, if you will. These were such as a bama was, for example, created by Adam and Cain and Hevel and Noach and Avraham and Yitzchak and Yaakov, all made bamas to bring their sacrifices. These are, what's the word I'm looking for? Not ad hoc, but
Altar.
Make do, makeshift. Altars that are not in Yerushalayim. They're not on
Elevation, right?
It's a
Mishkanim.
what?
Mishkanim.
So they're not mishkanim, but they are altars. They're called a bama. So now there were bama ktanas and bama gdelas. What's a bama ktana? Bama ktanas is something that you put in your backyard or wherever you want. Bama gdela was the ones that were in Gilgal or in Shiloh, for example. These were makeshift sanctuaries. They weren't actual like the Mishkan, and they weren't like the Beis Hamikdash. They were makeshift sanctuaries. So they were kind of in between the makeshift bamas that were made anywhere you want, and a permanent structure or a more permanent structure, I should say, like the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash. So now, the difference between such bamas, there's no difference between those bamas. Rather, el psachim, a Pesach offering can only be brought in the big bama gedela, like in Sheila or in Gilgal, or of course in a Mishkan or in the Beis Hamikdash. That goes without saying. Zaklal. This is the general rule when it comes to that. Kol shehu nidar v'nidav. Anything that can be vowed or donated. Like we said before, a vow is I promise to bring X. Nidav, this, I promise to bring this. Specific one. I'm donating this. Karev b'bama. That can be brought on a bama, which means before the Beis HaMikdash was established, you could bring it in your backyard on a makeshift altar. But anything that cannot be donated or vowed, like a Pesach offering or a chatas or an oil or any of these things that are a chatas, I'm sorry, any kind of elababama, they cannot be brought. Any kind of abama, they cannot be brought on a small altar. They have to be brought either in the Beis HaMikdash or in a bama gdela in the times of Shilei and Gilgal. Ein bein Shilei Yerushalayim. There's no difference between the Mishkan Shilei and Yerushalayim. Ella, rather, what are the differences? It's an interesting term again that we're employing. Hence this discussion here. That's how it fits in here. Ella shebashilei in Shilei oichlim kodashim kalam ma'isa sheni b'chol haroya. Anyone who can see the town of Shilei, if you could see the town, you could eat kochim kalam, which is the lesser form of kochim, and eat ma'isa sheni just because you see the town. Yerushalayim, but when it comes to Yerushalayim, as far as the Beis HaMikdash is concerned, lifnim and achayma, you can't just see Yerushalayim. You have to actually be within the walls of the city. V'chon v'chon, in both of these cases, kodshi kadashim, the sacrificial offerings, the sacrificial parts that are eaten by Kohanim, can only be eaten lifnim and akloim, within the curtains. You have to be in the structure proper to eat kodesh kadashim. Kedusha Shilei, another difference. In Shilei, there was a holiness, sheyesh achara heter. When Shilei was established, during the time of Shilei, you couldn't bring a bama in your backyard. You couldn't have a small bama in your backyard. You could not. Right. Only in other times, when there was no Shilei, then you can have in your backyard. Or anywhere else.
No more excuse.
But after Shilei stopped, there was a period before the building of the Beis HaMikdash, which bamas were now reinstated. So the Kedusha of Shilei had a time of permissibility for bamas afterwards. But Kedusha Yerushalayim ain't achra heter. Once the Beis HaMikdash was established in Yerushalayim, there is never again allowed a time when a bama will be allowed, even with the unfortunate destruction of the Beis HaMikdash. Please join us once again next week for chapter 2 of Megillah. That's going to be at 8:30. Have a very good evening.
Can I ask you a question?